Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by WEO Media on website accessibility and ADA compliance, the lawsuit environment, and keys to protecting your practice. Today, we're going to be covering the following items that are on our agenda. What is a website accessibility? How accessibility is good for business. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on the American Disabilities Act and why it applies to dental offices. I'm going to go into some of the trends that we're seeing in lawsuits and demand letters in the environment today. I'm going to cover the key components for website accessibility, web content accessibility, the importance of testing and documentation, and then things to consider beyond your website. My name is Corey Roletto. I am one of the co-founders and partners of WEO Media. I'm also vice president of Northwest Kidney Kids Board, where I've served for more than 5 years. Father of 3 boys, soon to be within the next month or so, 2016 and 11, very close birthdays. 15 years been an entrepreneur. Before that, worked in high tech at Intel, where I was an engineer, and progressed into marketing, and before ending my career, helped lead a competitive marketing team. And I had received an MBA from the University of Washington, along with my chemical engineering degree from there as well. The one thing you will note that is not on my resume here is the JD degree, because I am not an attorney. And a lot of this information that is going to be presented to you today is based off of the research I've done, talking to our business attorney about what is going on in the environment. But if you do need official legal advice, I encourage you to seek your own counsel. So that's my disclaimer for today. All right. A little bit about WEO Media. We're a full-service dental marketing agency. We work with hundreds of practices across North America. We boast, I believe, is one of the best, if not the best, client retention rates in the industry at over 95% year over year. Team is made up of 3 owners. Like I said, I'm one of those owners and co-founders. And we have 40 plus team members now, and another bunch that are joining us here come this Monday. So we've been actively hiring. We're based in the Portland, Oregon area, founded 12 years ago at this point. And other to note is that we are a certified Google partner. WEO Media offers a full range of marketing services, from building websites to doing search engine optimization, Google PPC. Obviously, today's presentation is around accessibility and the options where we give our clients for that as well. But if you need it as far as a marketing service, we can probably provide it. The other thing to note is we're a 4-time winner of the Best in Class Award presented at the American Dental Association. We're the only marketing company to win this award 4 years. And in fact, we've done it 4 years straight, and the last company to receive this award. All right, now on to the meat of the presentation. So what is website accessibility? So website accessibility is a set of rules, behaviors, code that help people with disabilities navigate and find information on a website. Now, when most people are thinking about accessibility and people that might have a disability that might prevent them from accessing information on a website, they usually think of people with vision impairments or blindness. But there's a lot of other disabilities that impair someone's ability to navigate a website. Maybe they have motor or mobility issues and they can't use a mouse. Maybe they're not blind, but they have color blindness, and so they have trouble seeing certain colors, or maybe they have troubles with seeing contrasts between colors. Maybe they have blurred vision, or maybe they're just aging, or cognitive disorders. One thing you might not think about as a disability with navigating a website is someone having a hearing impairment, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But when we're talking about making your website accessible, it's trying to not only address people that have vision impairments, it's a whole host of other disabilities that can impede their ability to discern information. and navigate a website. Now, accessibility in general can be good for business. 12.8% of the people in the US have a disability today. And when people talk about people with disabilities, a lot of times we're thinking about maybe the elderly population, people above 65, past retirement age. But in reality, the majority of people that are disabled are under 65. Over 10% of the population between 18 and 64 are disabled and may need assistance in navigating a website. And of those, 12.8% of people in the US that have a disability, 100% of them need you as a dentist. And so by making your website more accessible, easier for them to navigate, find information about you and your practice, the higher chance that you have is, for obtaining them as a potential patient. So that's the positive look on why you should be concerned about accessibility. And I think in general, as a society, we just look at it as the right thing to do. From the other hand, we're talking about the actual law. And this is a big block of text. I don't expect you all to read it. But when people generally talk about the American Disabilities Act or the ADA, they're generally referring to subchapter 3, where it states that all public accommodations essentially need to make available without discrimination on the basis of disability, the ability to equally enjoy the good services, facility privileges and advantages or accommodations of a business. And by definition, you'll see highlighted in yellow in subchapter 3, section 7F, the professional office of healthcare providers is considered a public accommodation. So in short, dental offices are a public accommodation and must be ADA compliant. The other thing to consider is where we are with websites and the definition of what compliance means. And this is where the waters get really muddy, because the ADA under its general law is very broad. And so we need definitions or standards to understand whether we as businesses are compliant, both in the physical accommodations, but also accommodations on the web, or does it even apply to the web? Now, the U.S. Department of Justice has done several things over years in regards to applying the American Disabilities Act and what it means for web content. They have ascertained that web content does fall under ADA guidelines and therefore must be compliant for public businesses. But they kind of muddy the waters here in the end of 2018 as they were driving toward defining what compliance meant and coming up with those standards. A letter was sent back to Ted Budd, one of the representatives in Congress who had inquired in the matter. And the Justice Department essentially said that although web content does fall under the ADA, and that's always been their viewpoint, that the DOJ was withdrawing from trying to set compliance standards and actually kicked the defining of compliance back to Congress, which, as we all know, isn't the most efficient body for defining standards. And then also within that letter indicated that the standard that they were looking at, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, which you guys all may have seen out and about as the standard of which we need to drive to, isn't necessarily the standard. And so what all this means is that we as businesses, public accommodating businesses, have to be ADA compliant, not only from a physical aspect of, proper ramp building and door width and the physical attributes of your offices, but also what we do on the web. But the problem is, unlike the physical requirements, which are very well defined, ADA compliance when it comes to web content remains undefined. And that's where things get difficult for us. The other thing that also plays into this is new state laws that are essentially putting additional requirements beyond the federal law, the ADA. And so one example of that is the California Unruh Act, which now has applied minimum statutory damage plus attorney's fees if a office is not compliant with the ADA. Now, what this means is that the actual plaintiff in the matter doesn't actually have to prove that they were harmed, because there's now minimum damages associated with non-compliance. What this has done is caused a surge in lawsuits and demand letters. Dramatic increase in both. Most of those lawsuits and demand letters are citing the WCAG 2.1 AA, a standard, as the bar for hitting, even though the DOJ, as I mentioned, said that that's not necessarily standard. This is what's being carried forward in the courts. And you can see since 2013, dramatic rise in the number of federal lawsuits. This was a little bit slowed with over last year with the pandemic. At least you would look at this and say from a federal level, but from a state level, with the inclusion of laws like in California, New York, and others that give an option to sue at the state level as opposed to the federal level, if we include those state lawsuits, which many are taking advantage of because of the minimum damage laws, we've actually seen a 23% increase in 2020 over 2019. And 2021 is expected to be another record year in ADA lawsuits. Now, most of these lawsuits do settle out of court. I'm sure a lot of you online may have heard of, the suits versus Target and Kroger, which are some of the big ones, but with big retail stores. There was also a recent ruling in the 11th Circuit Court with Winn-Dixie, which kind of, threw a little bit through the legal aspects of this into a little bit of a tizzy, because it was in direct conflict with the 9th Circuit Court. So if you guys don't know, 9th Circuit Court is mainly predominantly the West Coast, Hawaii, and I believe Alaska. And the 11th Circuit covers a lot of the southeast of the United States. The 9th Circuit Court has held up that it's very easy for a plaintiff to prove that a website or web content is not compliant and therefore seek damages, whereas the 11th Circuit Court just ruled the opposite in a 2-to-1 decision. So there was a dissent. But most of the settlements that we have seen have come through, pre-going to court, and the percentage of people that do end up fighting in court, most of them end up losing in court. Okay, so that's kind of the environment we're in. Now, what are some key components about website accessibility that you as a practice owner can take? And we really break this down into 3 components that we see essential for web content. One is the code of your website. So regardless of what's, CMS system that you may be using for your website, a lot of websites are built on WordPress, for example, or Squarespace or Wix or whatever it is. Those CMS systems in general were not built with ADA compliance in mind. And ADA compliance is very hard when it comes to code. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. So there's a couple options when you get into being compliant with a website code. And there's very expensive routes, and then there's routes that are now available that are cheaper based on technology. So I'll talk about those here in a minute. The next 2 pieces, one of which is forms, are items that are less thought about when it comes to compliance, but we have seen these named in lawsuits in regards to website compliance, and one of those is forms. So now here at WEO Media, we've actually had our own form system that we've been using for years. We also would build fillable PDFs for our clients. And at this point, we pretty much recommend and will only build forms in a new system we're using, called JOT forms, because it can be used to build HIPAA compliant and ADA, drive to ADA compliance as well within the forms if you have the right level of service and know how to do that within it. I'll talk about the requirements on that in a minute too. The third one that most people don't think about is videos. So someone is blind and can't see that video. How are they supposed to see the visual content or know what the visual content of that video is? And on the opposite side of that, if someone is hearing impaired, how do they get the information that is being said within the video? So I'm going to break down these three right here and talk a little about them individually. So let's talk about website accessibility in the code. So website accessibility over the years has been really fragmented. So there's designers that will take certain aspects into account to make sure that you have good contrasting colors, that you're limiting the use of red and maybe greens, because those are the two colors that if people have color blindness, that they're most likely not to be able to see clearly. And there's also pieces or elements of this that have been taken into account in the browsers, like the ability to adjust font size or image sizes. Some browsers may have other things that can help you built within the UI or design to help you navigate a website if you have a disability. But there's a whole other set of pieces of code that help website readers and other accessibility software really navigate and piece the website into usable forms, and also provide descriptions to elements that may be visual that a vision impaired person might not see. And so this includes things like ARIA, use of alt tags, organization of pop-up and drop-down menus, description of widgets that are on the site, description of buttons. If you're visually impaired, you may not know that there's a button to click on. So being able to do that through a reader and know that that button there is very important. And what we're seeing today is that, well, let me go back about 3-4 years ago when I was first investigating website accessibility. The only real good options that I found there available to us was to hire a firm that specialized in this, and they would charge an arm and a leg to evaluate a website. The first firm I talked to wanted a minimum of $17,000 to evaluate our website, and they didn't even look at it yet to know how many pages, and they said it goes up from there. And then that price started to come down, but most of these firms would have a large fee to review a site, to provide feedback and everything that needs to be changed. And then when they would charge a minimum of $500 a month in maintenance to have disabled people review the site and provide additional feedback, because website changes over time if you're doing updates. So they need to be constantly monitored and that feedback provided to make sure the website stays in compliance. Now, I don't know about you, but I got sticker shock with these, the large fees to get started and then the maintenance fees. I mean, it was just more expensive than building the website in the first place, or maintaining a website for that matter. So luckily technology has come along, and a lot of these components that I'm showing here can be done through analyzing the website and making adjustments to the code, not necessarily to the base part of the code, but overlaying it when things are detected like website readers. And this is done through artificial intelligence and machine learning. So at WEO Media, instead of rebuilding our entire CMS system, where we been hosting websites for over a decade now, we've gone the approach of using AI machine learning to provide the accessibility options in the code. And what's nice about this is that we can apply it to a website within 48 hours or so. The website has been analyzed and an overlay is available for those that wish to access it if they have a disability. But for anyone else visiting the website, they can use it as normal. So there's kind of this auto detect for if there's some sort of accessibility compliance needed. And the other nice thing about using computer power to do this sort of work is that you can constantly monitor it, 24/7 for updates and stay in compliance without the ongoing really high maintenance costs of staying really driving toward ADA compliance. Okay, and to give you an example of how this works now, our feature, there's other website accessibility companies out there. A lot of them work very similarly to what we're using today, but this will give you an example of how these works and how you identify it on a website. Now we have a base accessibility button that we have for free that we put on our website starting several years ago, but it's pretty limited in functionality. And where we're seeing everything going, we need to really jump up in the accessibility options. And so now we're offering on our WEO Media website, if you go to weomedia.com, you can see an example of this and play around with it. And we're offering this to our clients now, but you can go and click on this little disabled person holding a laptop. That's our accessibility options. And when you click on that, a window will pop up and it will give a bunch of different options for you as a disabled person to customize your experience as you're going through the web. So this is a lightweight, low cost solution compared to the consultants that are the other option, which are really expensive. Like I said, we have this option available to all of our clients today, and then there's other options that are out on the market too, whether they're compatible with different platforms or not. I don't know all the details in regards to those other ones, but one thing I would be a little bit cautious of is just implementing this piece doesn't necessarily mean that you're compliant, because remember the law is undefined, one. But really what you're doing here is providing accessibility, which is good for your business, and really reducing the probability that a lawsuit will come your way. Okay, so let's move on to the next piece. So moving from code to fillable forms and PDFs. So like a website, a lot of the lawsuits around this are driven to the WCAG 2.1 AA standards. And for a form, it includes code within the form that has a document title, you have language settings, you have tags that help a reader know the order that the form should be read. You also, if you're having tables, that you have defined headers, just like on your website, you need to have alt images or alt text to describe images. You also have to have ways to complete that form that don't require a mouse. So being able to tab from field to field, for example, or the ability to use some other assistive technology. So there's a good list of items that need to be done here. And my biggest suggestion to you, if you're going to have your new patient forms, your medical and dental history forms, your financial forms, your HIPAA compliant forms, whatever forms you're going to have on your website, the easiest mechanism to do this is to use a service that is already built around not only trying to meet the WCAG 2.1 standards, but also can be made HIPAA compliant as well, meaning it's secure submission and secure retrieval are the main components of that. Here at WEO Media, we use a company called JotForms, this is J-O-T, and that's where we're building all our forms now for our clients. And if you have online forms already that are fillable, great. Just check to make sure what the compliance is with whoever the provider is. And then JotForms is a great alternative to your paper PDFs. All right. I'm going to spend a little bit more time here on videos and video accessibility. So as I mentioned before, there's two main components here. One is caption, and caption is the text that represent what is being said in the video. It may also describe some other things that are happening in the video, but the main point of is it to make sure that what is being said in the video gets translated into words that you can see in high contrast on the screen. And so in this example, we have a video here where we obviously have text depicting what the doctor's saying. So in this case, the doctor's saying we've been working with WEO Media for about 4 years, and you've seen his patient growth go up exponentially, right? So that would be an example of caption. The other thing, which I can't really display through this medium, is audio descriptions. And audio descriptions are really trying to describe the imagery of the video that a visually impaired person might not be able to see. So an example of audio descriptions in these would be, like on the left-hand video here, would be Dr. Oxton is sitting on a chair in the hallway of his dental office. Might be a audio description of that imagery. And the second imagery might be Dr. Austin is standing at his office desk working on his computer, right? Now, caption is relatively easy to implement if you're using a web hosting or video hosting service like YouTube. Since 2018, they have had the ability, as soon as you upload a video, to actually have their program try to automatically convert word to text, which is really nice. They're also trying to convert all previous videos uploaded to YouTube, billions, prior to 2018. They're trying to also provide caption for those as well. But the key to this when you're uploading the videos is to make sure that for your YouTube channel, you have the caption feature turned on so that it's automatic. That way, YouTube will automatically try to add the caption for you and provide that option for people that want it. There's also ways within YouTube to manually add the caption in a couple different fashions. So I'd encourage you, if you have videos, you're using YouTube, use their caption feature. It's a great way to just get the basics done. And it does a pretty good job of translation. Sometimes you need to go in and make some corrections, however. Audio descriptions are much more tough to implement. In videos that have long pauses between people saying words, you can actually build in these auto descriptions, have someone narrate in between when people are talking in the video. But what I find with most videos that are in regards to dental offices is there's not much space between the talking. I know that when we do overview videos or video SEO, service videos, testimonial videos, doctor bio videos, there's just not a whole lot of space where there's not someone talking. So it becomes very difficult to insert in these audio descriptions. And so you have two options for that. One is to make a second version of the video where every time the scene changes, you pause the video, insert an audio description, and then start playing the video again. Not the most fluid way to watch a video, but it makes it accessible for someone that's visually impaired. The other way to accomplish this is to add a text file that has the caption and the audio descriptions in it, and often this is the file type's a VTT file. But essentially it's a text file that has caption and audio descriptions in it, so that in lieu of someone actually pushing play on the video, they can use a reader that's on their computer to play the text file, and it will go through it in order with the audio descriptions and then the caption, and then the audio descriptions and then the caption is usually how that works every time a scene changes. So that's a little bit easier way to add accessibility when you have videos where there's not very many pauses in order to add those audio descriptions. All right, so I'm going to move on to beyond those three key components you need to be looking at on your website. Those are where, in my research of lawsuits that are happening, where I'm primarily seeing the ADA compliance complaints be rendered. But there's also something to consider too, is that a lot of the law firms that are submitting these lawsuits and demand letters, 70% of all the lawsuits that are filed are by 10 law firms in the United States. So there are law firms that are specializing in ADA compliance lawsuits. And oftentimes they shoot before they find out the facts. And so even though you've done all these things, by the pure fact that the Department of Justice did not define what compliance means, and so there's wiggle room for the attorneys to try to define it themselves with their plaintiff, and the fact that oftentimes they're not looking at what compliance mechanisms were actually implemented on the website, they'll oftentimes shoot before they find the facts, like I said. So one thing that I would always suggest with, when you have your compliance software installed, if you decide to go with like a widget or overlay like we provide, is to have a accessibility test run, ideally before it's implemented, again after it's implemented, so you can show the work that you've done. You can show that, hey, on this date, we ran a compliance test and we passed. And then periodically run these tests again and keep them for your records. Your first line of defense, if you do get a lawsuit or a demand letter that says you're not compliant, that says, yes, it is, yes, we are, we've put a lot of work into this and we've been running tests and our tests say that we are compliant. Please move on to the next office with your demand letters. So this is something I'd recommend for all offices to do. And the last piece I'm really going to cover here is thinking beyond your website. So in one lawsuit that I've seen, the plaintiff, went in and documented all the things wrong with the website, and in trying to maximize the potential damages of the lawsuit, they then not only went through the website itself, but then they jumped over to social media and noted that, hey, their Facebook page has videos and they don't have caption and they don't have audio descriptions. So therefore, your videos are not accessible as there as well. So, I'd be conscious about other forms of media beyond your website where you're posting information. Facebook and Instagram are the two biggest, but there may be others out there that may be targeted with these lawsuits as well. I understand a little bit of the frustration around this, and that the base code and that of a website is, Facebook's, and that's not controlled by you. There's not really the ability for you to add necessarily alt tags to an image that you upload. But in regards to, video, the video uploads the video upload, and if it has built-in caption and audio descriptions, or there's a link to a file where they can get that, it would definitely help. The other thing to consider here is insurance. So if you're really worried about getting a lawsuit, thrown your way, I would check your professional liability insurance to make sure that it covers ADA compliance, and not only ADA compliance in the physical aspect, but specifically ask about your website and web content. A lot of times with professional liability insurance, it may cover ADA, it may not, it may cover physical, and there may not be anything written specifically about the web. And so that would be something I would definitely check with your insurance to get it covered. It may be fairly inexpensive to add a rider or have that additional policy added to make sure you're covered there. The other thing to note is, just because someone is sued once by one plaintiff doesn't mean someone else can't come along and sue that business again. So it could potentially not be a one-time shot. The other thing that I would just like to add to this, in talking to an attorney that is defending a couple of hotels in ADA compliance lawsuits, and in regards to their websites and online booking, is he finds that the retail is where most of these lawsuits are happening. They have gone into hospitality, like restaurants and hotels. And he mentioned to me he sees the next wave as really being medical. You know, we know a suit's already filed in California, New York, and several other states against dental offices, but he says it's really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the pursuit of medical, which he believes is next, probably about a year out. And it'd be good to have solutions for ADA compliance, at least driving to the standards as best you can before that wave happens. Okay, so if there's any questions, I should have mentioned this up front, but please feel free to add those to the chat. I'd be happy to stick around for a little bit to answer any questions you have. Also, you can reach me directly through the office line and asking for me, Corey Roletto. But feel free also to call my mobile phone directly if you have questions and concerns, or want an evaluation of your website. Go ahead and give me a call or shoot me an email. And if you have any questions about what services we offer, please feel free to visit weomedia.com. And you can also test out our overlay for our code on the ADA compliance work that we've done there. All right, I don't think I'm seeing any chat questions come in at this point. So if there are no questions, or you just like to ask me a question offline, that's perfectly okay too. I'll go ahead and wrap up this webinar for today. I appreciate everyone that has attended today, and wish you all the best luck in the future. Thank you.